Okay guys, here I am cleaning a blue cat. I've got my end nippers here, my end plier nippers, and I'm cutting the very hard barb. Okay, I normally wouldn't cut this quite yet, but I'm doing it now so I could lay the fish over and you could get a better look at what I'm doing. Okay, so on the head, you've got an area, like a gill plate that comes down, and you could feel that. See, there's a little point right there. I don't know how easy you can see it on this video, but there's a little point right there, and you want to follow that. There's meat right up in here that you want to get to. Be careful of these spines. So on the dorsal fin there's a spine, and on the pectoral fins each have a spine. That's where I just cut on the bottom one. These spines are basically serrated, and you really don't want to get cut by them. Also, the skin by the spines produce a stinging like protein that is very unpleasant. So the bigger fish have stronger spines, but they're not quite as small. The smaller fish have pointier spines that aren't as strong. Either way, you don't want to mess with those. Okay, so the first thing I do is I find the soft spot in the head, I look for that operculum, or the gill plate, and I cut using my beak point knife right through. You want to get right through, not to quite to the meat. Now when you get to this point here, you're just going to really what's underneath this part is going to be the air bladder, which actually connects through some bones of their first four vertebrae to their ears, making them hear much better. Anyway, go down with that to underneath. You just follow that gill plate. On top, you follow it to the dorsal fin, and the dorsal fin like comes to a point and then widens and goes back. So point, widens, and goes back. If you don't get far enough, when you go to skin it, you'll have a part you'll have to go back and grab again. Once I get this little point, I like to put my knife underneath it and lift. It gives me something to grab hold of. Once you get back to the back of the spine, you just follow from this adipose fin on the back here, which will just pull off, by the way. That pulls off really easy. Actually, on this one, I tried to pick it up by that using my pliers and almost pulled it off just doing that. Just one slice up that in the center. Then when you turn it on its side, you're just going to follow the fin all the way down to its butt. Okay. Now I'm going to turn this around and do the other side. I like using my towel for that. I just use this towel, it's easier to move it. They are slimy, but that slime allows them to have a little bit of cutaneous breathing, which means that they can actually absorb some oxygen through the air from that slime coat. So they don't have scales. And depending on my mood, I don't know whether I'd rather clean a catfish or scaled fish. I guess it depends on the fish. You get a feel for it and just connect to the back. If you go too deep, you'll end up pulling meat up with the skin. If you don't go deep enough, you leave too much of that like silver skin back. But you'll start to get a feel for it. Again, now because I cut that spine on the other side, I'm able to lay it down, and you can see what I'm doing here. I just cut right along the tail from the butt area, just along those fins to the tail. There we go. Now on the belly, when I come around, and I'm sorry guys, I know it's a little hard to see here, but I only have so many hands. I'm gonna get a better camera system. But once you do that on the belly, once you get your finger underneath it, you just take your fingers and you kind of come apart like that, and it's called undermining, and you could get that belly meat almost loose. This doesn't work on the rest of the body, but it does on the belly, and it makes it easier. For me, this is easier than filleting out the skin after. And it'll only go to the center line, and the center line's like a little tougher area, but you get your... My fingers aren't very... I have small hands, so my fingers aren't very long, but I get underneath there and get it. I'll do the same on the other side. So when I turn this over, to the other side. I'll try and keep it on its back so you can see. I'm just going to cut from where I did before in the belly, and I'll follow that around. And here you're just going to hit the air bladder so you don't really have to worry too much. That fin went down. Those fins are a great defense for them, not just because they can hurt things, but they also could like put themselves in a hole and put their fins out and really anchor themselves where they're at. Okay, I'm getting my finger and I'm pulling that apart. That'll allow me to get as much of the belly meat as possible. The belly meat is, to me, tastes a bit fattier. I like it sauteed. I really like it fried, especially on the bigger fish. But it's also good for soups and stews. And I will make a soup from the bones. I don't always put the heads. The smaller fish I do put the heads in, but because I can't really skin the heads well, it does give it a little fishier flavor. But I use it because I've got a cat that I take care of. That bone broth really helps. And I use the heads for the cat. Okay. Now, by the way, not that this has to do with fishing, but if you do have a cat, you don't want to feed it just fish. There is a amino acid that cats need that is not in fish, that they can't make themselves. So if you fed your cat an all seafood diet, it would be deficient in taurine. Why does that matter? Because just watching me fillet this is probably maybe a little boring for a little bit. And now you get to hear something else. Okay. See here where it's still connected? That's going to be a problem later. So I just cut that through. Alright, let's make sure I got all my cuts. So once I see where my fingers will go underneath and stop, I follow that line to that back spine where I've already cut. Basically right behind the butt. The anal opening. And I'll do the same thing on the other side. I'll just follow that down. The good thing about this is don't cut towards your hand, and don't cut too deep on the belly. You don't want to open the gut sac until after you've got it to the sink and you can get it away from the fish. Alright, there we go. I got all my cuts made. Theoretically, it should clean well now. It should peel well. These big fish are tough and not the easiest to skin. Some people like to fillet them out first and then cut the skin off, and I do that with some species of fish. But for me, I leave too much of the silver skin back on the catfish when I try and do that, and I don't like that. So for me, this works better. But I will show you that. Maybe I'll show you it on one of the other fish, just so you can see that technique too. I did do that other technique on a friend's live. We were out at Baker's Creek or Baker's Lake, Baker State Park, something like that, fishing, and we caught some fish, and I hadn't cleaned the catfish in years and decided to do it the way I do most saltwater fish. I did it in the dark. Considering I did it in the dark, it came out pretty well. Okay, so see, this will come out. Here where I'm getting some of the meat, I just went a little too deep. But it's by the belly, so I'm not really concerned. If it breaks like that, don't worry. Again, that was a spot that I just didn't go deep enough. That's why that happened. On these bigger fish, I sometimes cut the skin as I'm pulling it, so when I get to this end part, I don't get slapped in the face. But that's not pleasant either. Alrighty. I could get that right there. Didn't go quite deep enough. And you don't really have to worry too much on the center. I'll show you something it has on the center of its body. I don't like to eat this one part anyway, and it's a nice, it shows me where I need to cut for filleting. It's a nice marker. Okay, let me get this other side again. Here, let me cut. I'm using my little pliers here. They're end cutting pliers to cut this. See how strong these things are? There we go. Loose so I can move it around. Otherwise it just stands up and you can't get to where you need to. Normally I don't, because right now I'm just trying to have you get a look at what I'm doing. so I want it to lay down. Normally I do it while it's kind of standing, but I grab the little part I left for myself with my skinners. Again, these skinners are old, wore out, and I need a new pair. So bear with me a little bit on that too. I really need to show you this on a smaller fish where it actually, okay. Now I'm putting my hands behind that gill plate. On some fish, that plate is really sharp and you have to worry. So you can't do that. If I was cleaning a drum, for example, I would not put my fingers where I am right now. Of course, I wouldn't be skinning the drum this way either. It's scaled fish, so I would fillet it and then cut the skin off. Which again, some people do with this as well. Now when you get to the end and it comes off, it tends to want to slap you, so. Alright. Now, I'm going to get rid of that. Again, I don't believe in throwing anything away, so all the part that I don't eat, that I don't use, like the skin and the very end of the tail, and sometimes the head, the guts, I rebag and take it back to where I caught the fish and put it in the water for other things to eat. Obviously, you don't have to do that, but that's what I like to do.